Anyway, Richard, yeah, other than helping with Rimrunner and Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit in 1989 even, you don't appear to sort of appear in any kind of game credits between 1989 and 1992. What were you actually doing at that point after Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit? What were you doing sort of between then?
I started when I left Palace. I started a consultancy company with an old school friend of mine, and we actually did some freelance work for games companies. But a lot of times you don't end up in the credits for that. So in fact, I did Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit doing Amiga when I was running my company. We also did like just little bits and pieces on, like running courses for teaching assembly language programmers to go to C. So just kind of trying my hand with consultancy. Did a few games project, but didn't necessarily get in the credits for them. Just kind of doing bits and pieces, bits of coding, and then I saw an ad. I don't remember Personal Computer Weekly. I don't know if you remember that magazine. It used to be a weekly rag, printed on what can only be described as toilet paper. And I saw an ad for a job because I'd moved to Brighton by then. And I saw an ad for a job in Burgess Hill for a company called Mindscape. And I sort of I was kind of getting a bit sick of the consulting business because, you're chasing clients' money and stuff like that. It's just a bit of a pain. So I applied for a job and I got an interview at Mindscape. And as it turns out, the person interviewing me was Phil Harrison of Sony fame and Microsoft fame.
I know. I was going to say I know the name. I couldn't place it.
Yeah, I know the name. So basically, I sort of knew Phil from when he was at System 3. This is going way back. So I kind of vaguely, we weren't friends, but I kind of vaguely knew him, and he interviewed me for the job to essentially become sort of, I think it was like head producer or something, because they were just doing localization for American games. They had the rights for games like 40 Sports Boxing, 40 Sports Tennis, from a company called DSI. We also had the rights for Mega Fortress, Wing Commander. We distributed in Europe. So we basically started off doing localizations for American products, which was kind of Mindscape's game. And then Mindscape sort of started making their own products, and I sort of started running their development division. So I suppose there was a whole period when really I was mostly looking after localizations for a few years. And then as we started building our own dev studio, we hired some people and we started making our own products. And at that point, I probably started reappearing a bit in the credits because we started making games rather than just localizing them.
Yeah. So were you kind of pretty much project managing these projects?
Yeah, pretty much. So like at that point, it was kind of like, I suppose, like an executive producer type role or producer role. Kind of dealing with the finances, making sure that we had a team. I also still did a lot of programming, which kind of, for some reason, I was very good at fixing bugs. I suspect it's because I used to have so many bloody bugs in my own code, so I actually got very good at fixing it. So I still used to get drafted in to fix really difficult bugs. But after a while, I suddenly realized I was spending a lot of time coding, and I suddenly realized for me, it was kind of my emergency parachute. And I thought to myself, if I wasn't going to be a good producer, I'm going to go back to coding. So one day I deleted the C compiler off my machine and I stopped helping people because I thought it's important for my career progression to kind of focus on my main job, which is producing. So I did that, and it's very quick. You become de-skilled very quickly. So after a while, I couldn't really help people, and I ended up focusing more on the production side. I sort of went out. My team was really into Warhammer, and they did a tabletop hobby, and they used to play it a lot. And they sort of said to me, "We'd love to do a Warhammer game." And I said, "Well, I can talk to the people at Games Workshop and see if they want to license it." And that's exactly what we did. We would talk to them, and they were lovely people. And they let us do the license, but not before I had to go and play Warhammer because I wasn't a player, and it was very interesting. It's the first time I had to deal with a licensee, and it was really interesting. And I was lucky because they were lovely people, but they made me play it, and and I suddenly realized how much they cared about it. It's going to say, "Oh, your tabletop game." I know it's not a tabletop game; it's a hobby. And I thought, okay. You're terrible. No, it's a hobby. And after a while, I realized, no, they really mean this, because they see the whole thing holistically as a hobby.
Yeah.
And I think it's very smart. It's given that so real purity. So it's the first time I had to sit down and actually respect other people's wishes, and it was a very, so I was very lucky because they were lovely people. But later on in life, I had to do some licenses which weren't so lucky. But it was good dealing with licenses. It was there was a kind of a rigor to it, and I thought we did a really good job. The game was Shadow of the Horned Rat, and I thought we did a good job. They loved it as well, so much so they actually let us do a sequel. So that was fun.
So you're effectively taking a board game and transferring it across to a sort of computer.
No, we took a hobby. We took a hobby.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I'll go and wash my. We'll edit that bit out. Yeah, sorry, we took a hobby and turned it into a computer game. Yeah. It's interesting because
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's interesting. I mean, I've never, as much as I like computer games, I've never been one into like Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that. But I've quite a few mates who used to play. In fact, they still do actually. They still do play the old Warhammer and all this sort of stuff. And they say that the computer games are not a patch on the board games, whereas I can't understand that because how involved can rolling a dice and flipping a card over, how involved could that be? But I suppose it goes back to like the early days of computer games. You filled in the blanks with your brain, so that little V was actually a stealth bomber and the X's were bombs. So yeah, it's your imagination, I guess.
And it's also the fact that they're played around like a table with friends, right?
Yeah.
And you get all the banter, and you get the games master and stuff. And of course, we had to try and create this. So one of the main things was actually we wanted to make a real-time strategy game, and of course, those games are turn-based.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to actually talk them into making this real-time. They wanted it to be turn-based, and of course, turn-based on a computer is very boring, and we wanted it to be real-time. So we came up with a sort of quasi. A game that was under the hood was turn-based, but it appeared like it was real-time, and they loved that. And I mean, the game did pretty well and had very good reviews. And it was interesting because now you could actually play it by yourself, and you could never do that with the desktop hobby because you always have to have a group of people. So this allowed people to play this game by themselves. So it's kind of an interesting, really interesting experience. And so you're right, and I think just doing a straight translation would have been a mistake because it wouldn't have added anything. That's the other thing is they don't want us to compete with their own product. They want another product that sits right beside this product, which which would appeal to possibly a wider audience, an audience that wouldn't traditionally want to play their product, or to be an addition to what people spend in their shops.
I suppose when you think about it, it's like comparing a book with a film. They're two completely different entities. They might be based on the same sort of subject matter, but do you think your games would have convinced hobby-based enthusiasts to move across to computer games and likewise?
I think there's a good chance they would have tried it, and if they liked it, they would have said, actually, this isn't too bad. I quite enjoy this. I don't think it would have had a detrimental effect. I think it comes down to those. I don't know if you remember the perks, because they good old days, bad old days, when certain companies just used to get the latest license and just basically reskin their standard game with the latest license. And that was just exploitative. I think if you're going to use a license, you've really got to think, why are you doing this? Why are you going? Why are you spending the money on the license? And B, you've got to be true to the audience. You've got to do a good job for the audience. So I think in that case, I think it sat alongside the desktop hobby really nicely, and it wasn't something they wanted to do themselves. And if you look at it now, Creative Assembly are now doing Warhammer still. And it's doing well, So there clearly is they're doing it for a reason. It's been going on for years now.
I suppose when you think about it, I mean, this is no offence to any of these people into that hobby, but I would say it's quite a niche thing. Whereas bringing a game out on a sort of a computer, you're going to open it up to the masses.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it allowed them to get to the American market, which they weren't. They only had a few shops in America at that time. So they liked the fact that people would get exposed to their hobby that may not have been exposed to the hobby previously. I actually think, to be honest, I think if I'm being honest, that's the best way to use a license. Not cynically, but actually for a common purpose, really. As I said, I've not always had to feel able to do that. Sometimes I've had to do licenses just because the company paid for them. But Terminator, for example. There's not a story.
It's interesting you're talking about converting a board game to a computer. I was down in Manchester a couple of weeks ago with a couple of mates, and we were talking. And I mean, you're familiar with like the arcade games, Berserk, Frogger,
Yeah.
Zaxxon, Donkey Kong. These games were all released as board games. How I can't for the life of me figure out how you could replicate Zaxxon, which is a pseudo 3D shoot 'em up. How can you possibly replicate that on a board when you're rolling a dice? I just don't understand it.
I'm not entirely sure how you'd do that. I mean, I suppose what you would normally do is you'd do the opposite. You'd have a known board game mechanic and you just fit the graphics to it. So, but I think you're right. I mean, some games suit it and some don't. What I particularly liked with Games Workshop is their characters, and the art was just jaw-droppingly good. You know, their monsters and their troop. Everything had a reason. There was a rich history behind it and rich story behind everything, and that was really attractive. And it actually makes it much easier to make attractive art if you have really good reference. And their reference was amazing. They sent us so much stuff. I mean, unbelievable amounts of stuff to kind of as reference materials. So that was really good. So I think I can see how it goes both ways, but I think sometimes it's just a way of making money, to be honest. I think that's obviously, you know, a commercial world, but it's a shame. But we see it less and less. I mean, these days, I think licenses are so expensive. You know, I remember one of the companies used notorious for doing this is THQ. You know, they used to slap any sort of license, really. They used to just slap a game to it fairly quickly. But yeah, I think some things go both ways, and sometimes some things go better one way. I mean, look at. Okay, here we go. Here's a random thought for you. Lego, right? Minecraft. It doesn't look. Minecraft doesn't look like Lego, but it plays like Lego. Do you know? I think that's genius. It's absolute genius because everyone loves Lego. So, I mean, just total genius, you know. And we tried doing a Lego license when I said Mindscape. It was a total disaster, right? And then you come up with something and you think, okay, so this game, people love building stuff. People love building cathedrals and starships and ship. Well, you name it. Why is give them some basic building blocks? Let them build what they want to build, and then put a bit of jeopardy in it, like the smashing of the Lego, which I used to do all the time, you know. and suddenly you've got a computer version of Lego. You don't call it Lego because you don't want to pay them the license fee, but it bloody well plays like Lego. It feels like Lego, and that was its massive success.
And of course,
you can sometimes take an idea and transport the idea into another medium, and the idea can be spectacularly successful.
I mean, I suppose when you think about it, a computer game, whilst it's not a tangible thing you can actually see with the sort of power of like computers and consoles now, it's, I mean, back in the day, you know, I had a box of Lego, it had 200 pieces, and once I ran out of pieces, that was it. But with like something like Minecraft, it's, you know, it's infinite. It's literally infinite.
Absolutely, it's reusable. You can add more things to it. You know, the pieces don't wear out. There's still, you know, it's like, you know, not like real Lego, which after a while doesn't stick together properly. Or the older stuff, you know, which was been that better before. They've got better plastics now. But so I think you can move things, and they can be spectacularly successful. And some things are, and some things aren't. And so I think sometimes you don't even need to license. If you can find the core essence of what works in something.
Can you imagine back in the 80s when you brought out like Cauldron and you know, other games like Barbarian? If you'd brought them out now, you'd get the little hag, you'd get the little collectibles that you'd be able to sell for $4.99. You know, but obviously with that back then, that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, you couldn't do this, but you know, I think the writing was kind of on the wall where this was going. If you just looked at the exponential growth of graphics hardware and you know, and what computers could do, and then also manufacturing. And you say this, you know, I went to SIGGRAPH in Dallas. You know, SIGGRAPH is like a graphics show, And I went to SIGGRAPH, and this was actually, I went with Steve Brown, who was the co-designer on, he was like basically the main designer actually on Cauldron and Barbarian. And we went to SIGGRAPH together in Dallas, and we saw the first solid printer. It used to print out of liquid plastic using a laser. And that was 1984 or 5.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
So you could see it. I mean, you'd have to go to this real specialist show, and the printer cost $100,000, right? And the liquid cost $1,000 to fill up the tank. But you look at this and you go, hang on a second, this is possible. Do you know what I mean? You go, 3D printing is possible, because I've just seen it. Now, it's not affordable. But because it's possible, at some point it'll be affordable, right? so you can look at this and you kind of go, do you know? Yes, I could see some of this stuff happening. Obviously, nowadays you can 3D printers are dirt cheap, and you can do it yourself, and you can make all the characters you want. But technology was moving at such a fast pace. Okay, here we go. Technology was moving really fast, but the population wasn't. So in many ways, technology was ahead of consumption.
Yeah.
Right, because there was no internet. Right, people couldn't communicate. As soon as the internet happens, nowadays technology is actually moving relatively small chunks, right? But actually, the way people consume the content is so diverse. So you kind of have more ways of using things today, and actually fewer bits of technology, but people finding really creative ways of using them because they're all connected. When I was younger, it was more the opposite. It was like there's all these really cool things, which if you could afford them were really cool, but very few people could actually use them because they weren't ubiquitous. Everyone didn't have a mobile phone and stuff, you know. So everyone, like very few people, even going back to the year 2000. You know, I used to have a double ISDN connection because I was working at EA and they paid for it, right? And that cost like £100 a month or something ridiculous, you know, for like 64K bits. And that was the fastest internet you can buy. It might have been 128. And that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't a long time ago. And at that point, all you could get on the internet was basically, you know, well, I suppose it was porn and GIF files, porn and GIF, and you know, there's no shopping, there's no Amazon. Yeah, maybe the odd music exchange and stuff like that. That was it. You know.
Yeah.
And look at it now. That's only 20 years. That's not a long period of time. So it's quite incredible. The way people consume media now. I mean, all this move towards mobile and mobile games and free to play and stuff. I would have never foreseen free to play.
Yeah. I mean, even what we are sitting doing here just now, I mean, you know, you were a guy that I was aware of. You wrote games that I loved. And, you know, back in 1985, if somebody says to me, in, I don't know, 30 years' time, you're going to be talking to that guy, Richard, and you're going to be talking to him using a computer and a camera, and you just wouldn't even conceive that it's possible. And yet here we are, we're chatting to each other, and it's through the means, the technology. I
mean, remember video conferencing. I remember video conferencing, which literally cost something like it was something like £10 a minute to video conference, right? Using dedicated hardware. We used to have quad ISDN lines, right, to all different offices to do video conferencing. And one day somebody left it on over the weekend, and it cost thousands of pounds because they didn't turn it off, right? And nowadays, you know, everyone's doing it. You know, you could not have. So I think, whilst I could see where technology was going, I could not foresee the use cases. And the use cases are so diverse today, you know, and the types of games and what people do is so diverse. The way people get charged for things, you know, cloud computing is I couldn't foresee that, you know. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, very interesting. So I think technology is plateauing, actually, in many ways. Technology is plateauing because you can't get past the speed of light. That's one of the problems, and you can't get smaller than a certain size. But the way you use technology is just through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and it's a thing I talk about a lot, of all the technology that exists, the internet, you know, all that kind of thing, the fact that you can get an SD card, which the little metal bit is smaller than my fingernail, and it will hold like 500 gig worth of data in a tiny little bit of metal. That just blows my mind. I mean, are you aware of MAME, the arcade emulator? MAME.
Yeah. I've heard of it.
Yeah, you know what MAME is. I mean, going back, I live in central Scotland, and I didn't really live near the arcades back in the day. So the only time I got to play an arcade game was if my local chip shop got a Space Invaders, or we would go down on holiday. My mum and dad would stop in the M6 motorway, and you'd go in for a piss, and I would get 10 pence off my mum for a quick go of Galaxian. And that was about the only time I really got to play arcade games. And if somebody had told me back in 1983 that one day you are going to be able to play not just a copy, you're going to be able to play the arcade Galaxian on a computer. I mean, I can still remember my mate got me a floppy disk, and he says, you need to load this up. It's called MAME, and it was all DOS driven. You typed in MAME.exe-Galaxian. Boom! And then when I saw the boot screen appear on my PC, my jaw literally hit the floor. I couldn't.
I was going to say, you think witchcraft?
Yeah, and even now, I mean, I've got 3 arcade cabinets downstairs in my kitchen, and it still absolutely blows my mind that I can load up R-Type. I'm not loading up a version. I'm loading up the arcade version R-Type. That absolutely blows my mind.
The hardware is fast enough just to emulate everything pixel accurate, right? Which is again is jaw dropping. You know, it's you know. So I think we're kind of living in an interesting world right now, where we're kind of surrounded by ways of spending our time. Interesting ways of entertaining and being entertained. And I think the fact that nowadays, you know, everyone's got a phone in their pocket and every phone can play games. I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. You know, and now the biggest, you know, it's still by far the most dominant way of getting entertainment products in people's hands. And you know, the really weird thing is, you talk to people and you go, okay, so what, you're a gamer then? No. Okay, but you're playing a game right now. You're playing Candy Crush. Oh yeah, that's not a game. I'm just playing Candy Crush. So there's a bunch of people who don't even think they're gamers. They're gamers. You know, I'm sorry, but if you play Lemmings on your phone, you're a gamer, right? It's that simple. I keep having a conversation with my wife. You know, that she games more than I do. She goes, I don't game. You're playing Lemmings. You know, you are gaming. And I think that's what's really interesting is nowadays, I think the labels are kind of blurred, you know. It's kind of very weird, and I think really a lot of people are, I was calling closet gamers. You know, they don't admit they're gamers, but they really are gamers. They're playing it on the tube, they're playing it on the way to work, and I think that's one of the most fascinating things about products is that more and more you end up making products for people who are not like you. You know, for very valid markets, which are not necessarily markets that you consider yourself being in, but there are huge markets out there. So I think that's one of the big learnings is that, you know, when something becomes very widespread, that you need to cater for lots of different tastes, and you know, to stay successful, you have to really understand how it all works. And even understand how games work. You don't play yourself. I mean, my primary game of choice. Well, guess what I play? What I play for pleasure. Guess what sort of game I play for pleasure?
I'm thinking you're a Mortal Kombat type of guy. No, I'm thinking maybe Civilization or something, or Warcraft, or
no.
I'm hoping you're going to say Robotron or Defender.
No.
Cauldron.
No. I primarily play first-person shooters.
Really?
And do you know the only game I've never made?
Yeah, first-person shooter.
Never made a first-person shooter. So don't get me wrong. I've played all the games you've mentioned. I've played a lot of RTS games. I've played a lot of strategy games. I've played everything. I've pretty much played lots of games, right? But not for pleasure. I played them because I was researching how they worked and what they need to do and what was, you know. So I ended up making lots of games which weren't necessarily for myself. So don't get me wrong, I don't hate them, but I wouldn't go out of my way to play them. And the one game I've never made is a first-person shooter. Never got a chance to make one. So in fact, I started making one, and then I had to move on to do Catwoman. So for my sins, but so I think that's one of the interesting things I found is that it's absolutely fine to make stuff that you wouldn't consume yourself, as long as you surround yourself by people who are those consumers and they understand. They're the passionate people. And I tend to be the person who kind of pulls it back a bit and goes, well, maybe we can extend the audience for this a bit. Maybe we can make it a little bit. I'm typically the guy who makes things easier, to give it a bit more appeal and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of the that's kind of the thing I find is today you've really got to understand. To understand the market, you've got to really understand lots of games which you may not want to play. And sometimes you can probably make a better version of it, not necessarily being a fanboy or fangirl, because I think sometimes the history of things betrays you, because you always see things in a much more sort of rose-colored spectacle sort of way. If you look back, and if you realize, actually, bits of that weren't that good, or and bits of it worked really well, and bits didn't work.
See, obviously, when you went from, you did work on the Commodore Amiga, Atari ST. How did you find the transition from 8-bit to 16-bit? Then, obviously, you went on to other machines after that. It was like
suddenly rattling around in a massive box. It's like I went from feeling claustrophobic on the 64-bit machines to being agoraphobic on the 68,000. There was so much space. There was literally so much space. My first thing was, how am I going to fill 720K on a disk? How am I going to fill that? That's more than 10 times the amount of stuff I've ever done. That was my first one. It's like, holy crap, this is so much data. Like, I'm going to look like a total fraud when a disk has only got 64K on it, because that's all I know how to make. So I felt really agoraphobic. It was just such a beast of a machine. There's so much memory. I was used to having one accumulator, right, on a 6502, one accumulator, right, right. The 68,000 has got 8. 8 accumulators. They're 8 bits that can do maths. Whoa! It's like there was 1.5 data pointers on the 6502. The 68,000 had 7. I could talk to 7 bits of memory at the same time. Well, not the same time, but without having to reload the data pointer. It was literally jaw dropping. I felt like, whoa! This is just. It wasn't like it was literally. Like stepping into another universe. It wasn't just this wasn't like a minor step. This was such a step, So I felt for the first sort of 6 months, I felt like a total imposter.
Do you not think? I know I'm not a programmer at all. I was a purely consumer, a gamer, and I always feel really lucky that I was around at the very, very birth of this whole hobby. From getting my first Pong machine to be able to interact rather than just watching the TV. I could turn a dial and this thing would move in the TV. And then I saw Space Invaders, and I got my first Commodore 64, and then I got my Commodore Amiga, and it was just like, wow. I've got a 17-year-old daughter who's 18. She was 18 yesterday. She's through the wall.
Congratulations.
She doesn't know anything.
Just kidding.
Don't get me started. Kids of that generation, they always know that what the internet's always been a thing. I don't think kids nowadays will have. I'm saying kids. I don't think anybody, probably 30 years or younger, will have any real nostalgia for systems. We've got the.
And why should they?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I grew up just about the time that color TV came out. Right, so color TV. I started being aware of color TV, and I still remember the transition between black and white and color. Right, and there used to be some really good things in black and white. I wouldn't watch them because they weren't in color.
Yeah.
Do you know how is this any different to, you know, looking at an 8-bit retro game and going, that looks pretty crap, you know? It's the same. It's the same thought process, and then people going, "Oh, look at Lemmings," and you go, "Oh, I used to play Lemmings on the Amiga." Oh yeah, but look at it, that's rubbish, you know. Look at my phone. Look, my phone's really cool. I totally get the fact that, you know, this is, I think, one of the things about, you've got to. I think you've got to experience nostalgia from the first person. It's very hard to transplant nostalgia. Because the reality is, people just I sort of find this, you know, with my offspring, they just don't care. You know, they like I tell my students at Goldsmith, I said, you know, I grew up before the internet. It doesn't mean anything to them. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything on so many levels. Do you know? Because you go, okay, imagine a world without the internet. Okay, right. Okay, I can imagine a world. Okay, so world without the internet. You want to, I don't know, you want to buy, I don't know, you want to buy something for Christmas. Well, go on Amazon. No, you can't go on Amazon. Oh, okay. I'll look it up online. No, can't look it up online. There's no online. Right? What do you do? Do you know? And you literally get it down to, okay, well, I suppose I could go down the shop. Okay, how are you going to get to the shop? Well, I'll just get an Uber. Can't get an Uber. Do you know what I'm getting at? There's just so many levels where you have to deconstruct what it would be like, and then you suddenly realise, you know, actually no. You know, when we grew up, I mean, I don't know your age, but I'm sort of like, you know, I'm sort of late 50s. But when I grew up, Defender was so cool. It was just the coolest thing. And I'll tell you what was even cooler is if you could play it well enough that you could park your ship in the right place, go to the bar, get a pint, and you'd still not be blown up. That was my party piece, right? You know, that was my party piece in Battlezone, right? I should probably not say this, but I was about 14, you know. I think the drinking age was 14 in those days, you know. No, it wasn't.
Can we just rewind for a second? I've got one of my mates, Paul Spriggs, is actually, Paul lives down in Newcastle. I think he has at one point held the world record for Defender. I went down to a place called Arcade Club in Bury just before lockdown. I was actually down there a couple of weeks ago, funnily enough. Went down there and it was a Williams event. So I was invited along just because I know Paul. And there was all these guys and they were all putting like 2 million in Robotron, 10 million in Defender, and I can get to level 3 in Defender. Did you tell? And so I actually bought Paul's Defender cabinet, which is now downstairs. It's a homemade one, but it's got, Paul's a big guy. I actually had to cut a bit of height off it because I'm quite small, but it's got the proper Defender controls. And it's, so did you say there's a point you can actually?
Well, you have to time it just right. Once they turn into mutants, you can't do anything because you can just they just turn right. But if you get it just right, then you can literally just turn around, get yourself a beer, go back to the game, right? So you can't go away for 5 minutes or anything. There's no safe spot. If you get it right, and before they turn into mutants, right, and start seeking, before they become sort of like whatever heat seeking. Yeah, you've got a few seconds to get yourself a drink, and if you just do it like if you stage manage it so you look like you're playing, and then you just go, I'm just going to get a beer. And it looks very impressive. Yeah, I'm sorry, very sheltered childhood, but you know, it looks impressive. You know, to kind of I was nowhere near the best player, right? But you know, that was kind of fun. You know, you kind of made fun out of these things, and you had like. You know, you had your games you were playing at home, so you'd swap cassettes with people, and you know, and at that point, you know, if you want to talk to people, it's mostly you talk to them at school. You know, you're talking to playground about stuff. And nowadays, this would all be on the internet. The audience would be much bigger, right? And you'd have little echo chambers and stuff. But unless you actually did this, you wouldn't appreciate why this was fun. You know, because really, I'll here's my example. Going home meant either playing Elite, right? I used to have a BBC for a while, and I played Elite on my BBC literally for hours and hours and hours, listening to my mate's music, who's in the band, and used to play Elite for hours and hours, because the alternative was 2 channels on TV. Or listening to a record player. You know, that was the alternative.
Yeah. I know.
So of course, Elite was brilliant.
Yeah. I played Elite a lot. I got to Dangerous. That was as high as I got. But
yeah, So I think what's interesting today is, like, you look at what people do, and you look at the average attention span. And if your game isn't fun within 90 seconds, you're deleted.
Mm.
I used to have people saying, "Oh, Richard, when's your next game coming out?" "Oh, well, it's probably going to be about 18 months. Oh, I'll start saving now." I mean, compare and contrast those two scenarios. You know, you're 90 seconds to a year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're kind of getting off gaming a wee bit, but one of the things that exists nowadays is if you go into your work or you see your pal and you say to him, "Oh, did you, I was watching Breaking Bad last night." "No, I've never seen that." "I was watching something else." And because there are quite literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of things to watch, the chances you and I watching the same thing last night was probably non-existent. So you don't have anything to talk about. Whereas back in I'm 54, by the way. Back in 1977, or whatever it was, Christmas, you remember getting the TV times and the radio times, and you used to circle, right?
God,
Jaws
is to circle things. You have to get both of them because there's one for each, right? Yeah.
Jaws is getting shown on Christmas Day, right? We'll watch Jaws. We'll watch the Generation Game Christmas special. We'll watch Morecambe and Wise, whatever. And I mean, some of my happiest times were, my mum and dad have both passed away, sadly, but when the Olympics came on, my dad and I used to sit and watch the Olympics, and we used to watch the snooker, and you can talk about things. You can talk about the Dennis Taylor, Steve Davis Black final. Nowadays, you don't have that because we're all watching different things.
And also because recording on VHS or whatever, Betamax was such a faff, you'd normally watch it live, right? Nowadays, when's the last time you watched live TV? You know, it's kind of a weird thing. And you know what you said just now about, I didn't think that's where you're going to go with this. I'll tell you the weirdest thing I had is, I always talk to my students about, because I'm a massive person that you have to experience this, right? So if you've not played BioShock, you haven't lived, right? You've got to.
BioShock's a great game.
No, seriously. If you hate games, but you want to if you hate that sort of game, but you want to get good at games design, play BioShock. End of story. There's no excuse for not playing it. It is a masterpiece of games design, right? So you say to people, okay, you've got to play this and got to play that, and then you say, okay, have you played the game? No, watch somebody play it. So they watched a YouTube video of somebody playing the game because they couldn't be bothered to play this. And I just think that's the weirdest thing. It's like watching somebody eating food and then thinking this is going to fill me up, or I'm going to get the textures, it's just the weirdest thing. So for me, I nowadays, I was talking to an old friend of mine. We used to work at EA, and he actually worked at Mindscape together with me, a guy called Jeff Gaiman. And years ago, Jeff said they did some research, and EA did some research, and they figured out that 30% of people play games. Right, 30% of people play games and watch games being played, and 30% of people just watch people play games. Think about that. I thought, God, this is the weirdest thing, and then I suddenly go, no, of course it isn't. How many people say they're football fans when they have never played a game in their life? They just watch it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a really weird sort of thing about watching games and playing games, and I think sometimes the spectating thing, especially nowadays with Twitch streaming, is very, very important. So I can actually see, to your example about the sharing experiences. Sometimes this experience, I think, for gamers are hybrid, where two gamers will talk about a game, and one will talk about playing it, and the other will just talk about watching it.
Watching it being played.
Do you see? But they'll both consider themselves gamers.
Yeah.
So there's kind of an interesting, and I didn't see that coming at all, because I'm looking and thinking, why would I want to watch somebody else eat a meal? No, I want to eat a meal myself.
I mean, as I says, I'm an old bloke. I'm Scottish. Every Sunday night, I've got about 40 or 50 people that tune in to watch me playing old games. And they're commenting on they can comment, and I'll say, you must have something better to do with your life than sitting watching me playing games. But there's a fascination. There's a massive amount of people out there that enjoy watching other people playing games. Yeah, in my case, I'm pretty shit at games, so I make an arse of it, and I'm playing old games. But it's quite a fascinating thing that people would like that.
It's a performance, and I sort of would equate it to, and this is the bit which took me a while to get my head around. It's like watching gladiators. It's watching gladiators competing, because they're your proxies, right? So there's like, it's the same way you can follow a football team without playing football. Is there, the people on the field are they're your heroes, and I think that's really interesting. So if we're talking a little bit about the stuff I didn't see coming, the stuff I did see coming. What I do see coming now for games is I see that, and I've already started. If you look at what's happening right now with Netflix and Amazon, they're all heavily going into games. I mean, Netflix are hiring games people like there's no tomorrow.
I didn't realize that.
So you're going to see this. You're going to see this fusion between linear media and live game streaming and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be the next big thing. So I think the fact that you're going to have imagine Squid Games, but for real. Squid Games with real avatars playing Squid Games. Right? Why not? People watching it and people betting on it, and so I can see that's going to be. I think that's going to really change games in the same way that TV changed football. From being a sort of like little club teams to being these mega teams. So I think you're going to see, because the way consumption is changing, you're going to see a lot of changes in the way that the actual medium will evolve, which will include spectating and gambling and all of the stuff you see nowadays.
I mean, you think about it. When was the last time I went out and physically bought a game? I mean, my daughter's got a Switch, and you buy the game for the Switch, and it comes in a little A5 thing, and it's got a picture of Super Mario on it, and you open it up, and there's no instructions, and all you get is this tiny little card. That's it.
Yeah.
It's all downloadable now, and I mean, I've just got myself the new Xbox, and I've signed up to Game Pass, and you basically hire games. You just they put them up for a couple of months. You hire them, you download them, you hire them, then you delete them.
It's like the Netflix model, isn't it? It's similar to Netflix for games, and I think this idea of ownership. I think ownership is just going away. The idea of physical ownership. So I think everything is going to be like software as a service type stuff, or games as a service, which again is a really big shift. But then if you look at some of the other stuff, like look at the way that music is now Spotify. So the idea of like having a CD collection, having a CD collection is totally alien to most people.
It's funny. I mean, I've got. I mean, what have I got? I've got Amazon Music, and I've got a certain device that if I say its name, it'll tell me what the weather is, and I'm not going to say it. But I can basically say to it, play AC/DC Highway to Hell, and it'll just play it. It's just there. But fairly recently, I decided to buy myself a Panasonic stacking system. I've got the double tapes. I've got the vinyl. I've been buying a bit of vinyl again. I've got the CDs, and I've been going down charity shops and getting like 10 CDs for like 50 pence.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. So I've been playing them, even though I can tell the Amazon device to play the latest album by Meatloaf or whatever. I still like to put the CDs in, but yeah, that's completely alien to most people.
Yeah, and again, this is a really interesting thing in terms of curation, because the artists spend a lot of time thinking about the order of the tracks and the moves they want to generate, and of course nowadays you never listen to the whole album. You just pick the tracks you want, and so you kind of think, well, that's going to change music. I mean, it's quite interesting. Years ago, when by home taping, we used to tape albums. Used to kill. It was meant to kill the music industry. Little did I know that Napster would kill the music industry, but another story. Basically, well, actually, Apple probably killed the music industry more than Napster did. But the interesting thing is, a while back, so we had. You ever heard of a band called Lloyd Cauldron Commotions?
Yep, Perfect Skin.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
So
I love them.
album, perfect skin. The album before was Rattlesnakes, right? I think it's Rattlesnakes was on perfect. So Rattlesnake was the album, and Perfect Skin was on it. And my friend did me a C90 of it, but they did it back to front. So I always thought the album started sad and ended up happy, when actually the album starts happy and ends up sad, right? That's really weird, because I always had this, like, this idea, and of course because they're already recorded backwards, I got the wrong story, right? And so I think nowadays, when you're taking things in piecemeal, when you're taking the whole thing in, it kind of makes it very difficult for the artist to do more than little snacks,
Yeah.
And I think nowadays everyone's snacking all the time, so it's very hard to kind of plan the whole thing. And I think that really sort of reflects on games design, where I think in many ways nowadays games design is a lot of it is made like a soap opera, where you build a set, like a sandbox, and then you have action happening within it, and then you change the settings slightly, you change the graphics slightly, and you change the same way in soap opera, we change the jokes, right? I change the cast every so often. But all the investment is essentially ensuring that the content can be updated. So I think you are going to see a big change in the way games are made to be less like movies and more like TV shows. So I think that could be interesting. And I think that also would play into this sort of whole Amazon and Netflix delivery model, and also the Xbox delivery model. So I think you are going to see, certainly, or hopefully still in my future lifetime, you're going to see some massive changes in the way things are consumed. So I think the way we consume things will become quite alien. It'll become as bad. It'd be as funny as saying, did you realize that there were movies that didn't have sound and people used to play the piano? It's like, what? It's like, what, a black and white movie where somebody's playing the piano? You're kidding me, right? We're going to sound like that in a few years. What do you mean? 8 bits, like these big blocky graphics with what's it? A joystick?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, I know. I certainly miss the good old days. I mean, you're talking about Elite. I've still got Elite in the Commodore 64 there, and I mean, you literally go. I mean, I could go and get it for you. In fact, I'm going to go and grab it for you. Just to
beautiful game. It's just joy.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about. I mean, games nowadays, you download it, you don't get anything. Then you get bad boys like this.
Yeah.
You had the box, and then inside that, I've got my membership card, which I'll need to send that away. Actually, I keep forgetting.
Big book. Yeah.
Yep, we've got the space annual. I mean, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful
stuff.
I was a massive part of buying games back then, and then you had the Dark Wheel, which I've never read, I have to say.
Yeah. No, it's as I say, we tried to pick up the publishing rights for Elite, but at that point, David and his partner become too expensive.
Oh, Ian Bell. Then you've got the quick control card, like so. And then you've even got the little overlay
for the keyboard. Yeah, that was genius, actually.
There you go. You've even got the guy bought that 6th of July 1985.
Wow,
for £14.95. And then you've also got, what the hell is that? I could upgrade to the Elite disc if I want.
Yeah.
And then this poster, not this exact one, this adorned my bedroom for many, many years. I mean, you just don't get stuff like that nowadays.
No. Yeah, it's weird, and this all goes right back to what I said about ownership. I think the whole concept of ownership these days is odd, in that you rent things, you rent software as a service, you rent a game, or you rent you kind of play a game for a while. So I think this is going to fundamentally change the relationship people have with things, because there won't be any permanent memories of anything. It's all very transient. There's not going to be something you can pull out of the box and go, look at this, or look at those, on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be any physical record of anything. And of course, digital records. I mean, how often do you look at all the photos you've taken on the phone? You take the picture, You maybe Instagram it to somebody, and then you forget about it, you know.
And then it's yep, you're absolutely
it's
right.
like the photographs in my loft, you know, never look at them. But the difference is, I can still look at those photographs in 20 or 30 years. I won't be able to look at the photos on my phone because I'll have changed phones several times by then. So I think we are entering this sort of period where everything is a bit more transient, and I think that changes your relationship with the items. It makes it more casual.
It does. It's all disposable. It's like fast food of video games, music, because nothing's tangible. You can't. You'll remember back in the day, Richard, going down to your friend's house, and he would put on his latest Led Zeppelin album, whatever, and you would sit and look through his albums, and oh, look at that, and you would look at it, and you don't do that. You don't say, "Can I have a look at your Apple iTunes playlist, please?" You're not interested.
And I think that's what changes the relationship with. And so this back to what I said a few minutes ago is, I think the way that things are being consumed right now will totally change what is being made by more than we can ever imagine. I mean, to the point where nowadays you look at Netflix. I don't know. There's a German show called Dark that came out a while back.
I started watching that, and it was a bit too dark for me. I found it a bit too depressing.
But it was basically about an alternative reality and time travel and stuff. And then, all in German, so limited market. I did dub it quite badly, but and then suddenly Stranger Things comes out, and you think, I wonder if they looked at how well Dark was doing and wondered if we only did this in America with American actors, we'd make a fortune. You know, and nowadays you kind of see all of this, like, you know, looking at what people are doing and what people are consuming, and then you're designing products for them. So the idea of just kind of making making original product these days. I mean, original, I mean totally way out there. You know, I think there's so many factors against this. So you get this homogenization, you know, where you're getting, because creativity is risky, right? And so you're kind of seeing a lot of samey stuff, but not same in a way that you'd think it's samey. It's like the graphics are different, so people think it's different, but actually look at some of the game experiences, they're very samey. I can't think the last time. I mean, I suppose the last time somebody really took a risk with a game was something like Cuphead or Dark Souls, you know, which just all the games are getting easier, so they're going to make something really difficult. But it's, you know, and I think that's kind of because when I grew up, there's so many games. I looked at them thinking, God, this looks really. I think this is so clever. It's not for me, but I can see it's really clever and very innovative, and you know, all of those things. And I think nowadays there's so many forces that would stop you doing that, because you compare, you're all constantly, a lot of stuff, you know, you wouldn't make. Like, okay, if you did, I'll tell you right now, if you tried to make, my theory is, if you tried to make Minecraft today, you wouldn't, because there would be so many people telling you the graphics look rubbish. Right? So you just wouldn't do it. You know, you'd make it with beautiful graphics, and then it would fail because you haven't focused on the gameplay. So I think in some ways one of the dangers is that we end up with people taking relatively few risks. You know, it's like take a game like take a Clash style game. You know, Clash of Clans style game. Yeah, okay, Clash style games, we know they work. Let's just reskin it and do something that's Clash-like, because we know the Clash mechanic works, right? People will just like the new skins, you know, or take the, you know, match 3 type games. There's like literally dozens of those you can do just by reskinning it and changing the sound effects, and so I think in some ways the creativity
has gone.
Well, it's not gone, but it's harder because you are. You know, God, if somebody ever told me, you know, if somebody told me that, you know, I know there were so many other fighting games out there just like Barbarian, I wouldn't have made it. So at that point, ignorance was bliss. It was absolute bliss, you know, because we probably, if we knew how many other people working something similar, we wouldn't have made it. I mean, Psygnosis were working on a game called Barbarian at the same time as us. We only found out right at the last minute, right? If we'd known this when we started because of the internet, which we didn't have then, we wouldn't have started our game. Think about that.
Have you played the Psygnosis Barbarian?
I got bored with swapping discs. I have because I played this competitive game, but it was beautiful, but God, it was slow.
It was. I don't know who came up with the idea. Let's make a sideways scrolling platform beat 'em up, and we'll make it mouse controlled.
Yeah, it was.
And there's such a delay and lag. Terrible game, but beautiful.
But they put a ton of marketing behind it.
Yeah.
The number one question I have is like, did you why did you copy Psygnosis? And we genuinely didn't. We genuinely didn't. And if you play our game, it's totally different, right? So we genuinely didn't copy them. It just happened to be we were both working on a game called Barbarian, right? So it was kind of a weird thing. And if we had known of each other's existence, we probably wouldn't have done it. So in many ways, the lack of internet was to blame for us doing this game, or was to be praised for doing this. And there's quite probably a bunch of other games I wouldn't have started if I'd known. If I could know everything I know now, I wouldn't have done them. But I'm glad I did. Ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Just rewinding a wee bit, Richard. Back in the kind of early days, or even the 8-bit days and the 16-bit days, did you kind of go along to any of the big kind of computer shows at Earl's Court, and did you display all your wares?
We used to display. That's the number one way of getting. Go back before the internet. Number one way of getting out there. Especially at the trade shows, because most of the times our games are sold through small shops and big chains. Like Boots the Chemist used to sell games. So one of our biggest customers was Boots and Woolworths, right? So we used to be at the shows, and we used to talk to the small shops and larger shops. We used to talk to distributors like US Gold and or US Gold mostly imported stuff, but Centresoft. You had to be there. So you used to do all of the shows. Used to go to E3 every year, and even before that, CES in Vegas. It was very important to be in front of people. That's also how you met most of the press, especially international press, because like you could always phone up Gary Penn and Julian and get an interview with them in Zap and Crash. But you want to talk to the US press, you'd have to show your face in the US.
That's just another point I was going to say. Yeah, obviously, what was your relationship like with these guys, with the Zap guys? And
great. We used to go to the pub, get pissed, and used to write good reviews. Perfect relationship.
Thing is, for a consumer like myself, these guys, they were the Bible. I mean, because
they used to write. I have to say, they used to write very honest reviews. Actually,
definitely.
A lot of magazines, they used to go. Used to phone you up and say, "Okay, so do you want to place an ad then?" No ad budget. Oh, because we're just doing a review on your game. Could go either way, but they weren't like that. I mean, they were totally. I mean, there was a lot of integrity, but it wasn't right. A lot of times, if you wanted the coverage, you had to play the game.
Aye.
Basically, advertise.
Yeah. Again, as a consumer, there was only really maybe 3 ways to know about a game. You would be standing in John Menzies, and you'd be looking at the cassette inlay, and you'd go, "And this looks quite good. All right, I'll buy it," not realising it's complete shit. Or else your mate would maybe have the game, or when the Zap came along, that was the Bible. If Zap gave a game 50%, you didn't touch it.
Or if you got a front cover. The most important thing for us was to get a front cover. And the front covers cost many beers. You
did get a Barbarian. That was on the front cover, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I'm sure it was.
Many a happy hour down the Molten Hops in King's Cross with the relevant people.
Did you hang about with Gary Liddon as well? Yeah.
Yeah. We used to,
I know Gary very well actually. Yeah. I've met Gary quite a few times.
Really, I was gonna say that was really it was we were so naive. I mean, just like all of us, so naive, and we just did it because we enjoyed it. So, yeah.
Of course, Jeff Minter. I mean, Jeff. I think he actually had a comment, a column in the first couple of Zaps, and then he brought out Mama Llama, which to this day is I cannot understand it. One of my mates likes it, and he's tried to explain how to play the game, and they absolutely panned it. And then I think Jeff and Zap they fell out for a wee while because.
Jeff was a real sort of force of nature, and he kind of just did I thought he was one of the most innovative people, and he was a bit hit or miss, but some of it was just genius, I don't know whatever happened to him.
Jeff's still putting out games. I mean, he's putting out games for the PlayStation 4. He put out one about 6 months ago called Moose Life.
Right.
He's done stuff for VR, so he's still putting out games. He's still plagiarising Tempest, I have to say. I mean, he'll not mind me for saying this, but he does tend to steal sound effects from Defender games and. But I'm a massive fan of Jeff's.
So we used to literally buy stuff of his mum. His mum used to come to the shop with cartons of cassettes, and we used to just buy them off her and sell his games. So in many ways, that's what gave me the idea to start Pilot Software. As I said last time, it's the fact that we used to sell a lot of games, and it was like I thought this is we could make games. That's how I ended up in the games business. But I think it is. I think nowadays, of course, you still have, everything is just different. You have your Twitch players, you've got the influencers, you got all of the, thousands of, millions of consumers, and what's kind of interesting these days is with most of these things, I don't know if you know much about free to play, but you look at some of the app stores, for example. I mean, they're quasi monopolies, right? And you have to pay your cut to the App Store, and then you have to pay for your, paid installs to get up here. So in many ways, it's no different to taking the Boots buyer out for a few drinks and a nice meal to get to the top of the chart. It's just now it's become very kind of automated. You pay your money and you get up to the top of the chart, But it's kind of, I think nowadays, if I was an aspiring games maker, I'd really worry about how many other people are aspiring games makers, because there's a lot of product out there seeking a market. This is totally, I suppose the biggest difference was when we did this, it was actually quite hard to make games. A few people did it, but then when a game came out, there was great anticipation and people would buy it. And nowadays, there's lots of people, because the tools are so good, like Unity and Unreal Engine are amazing tools. It makes it so easy for people to make games. So everyone's making games. But actually, I think proportionally, actually fewer consumers compared to how many games there are. So it's actually quite hard to sell the game, which is why nowadays, most of the battle isn't so much what the cool game is how you're going to sell it.
Aye.
Without selling stuff was an afterthought. It's like... nowadays, you always start off by thinking, how am I going to sell this? What's the niche in the market for this?
Aye. Whereas back, and I know, like Jeff. I mean, Jeff did he made games that he wanted to play, and it was a nice sort of. What's the right word for it? The fact that other people wanted to buy it was quite nice. So that's nice.
I think absolutely, and I think that's kind of what you end up, kind of turning your hobby into a business, and I think nowadays that's a lot harder. So I do worry about aspiring games makers, because nowadays the bar to entry is so high. And most of it is like you can make a decent enough small game for maybe 6 months to a year, right, with a team of 2 or 3. But if you want to sell that game, you're going to need $1 million just in budget for launching it. So it's no longer about how hard it is to make the game. It's like, how do you get it noticed, and how do you get it to resonate with people? Because there's so much competition out there.
I mean, you look at the credits. I don't know if you've the last time you completed a kind of current gen game. You look at the credits. One of my favourite games. I'm not really into modern games, I have to say, but one of my favourite games was Last of Us, which is. It's a beautiful game. It's a lot to say. It really is. It just immerses you in. My daughter and I played it together, and we just enjoyed it together. But you look at the credits; it's like
movie credits. I mean, you literally. You're talking about a game probably cost $200 million to make. So I reckon cast of between 450 probably permanent, and probably another double that for contracts and external work. So massive projects. Huge gambles.
But when you think about it, I've completed it. I've never gone back to it. Yeah, I still play Barbarian and Cauldron. So there you go. Yeah. Go figure.
Well, there are more people. Okay, but it's also like the if you are taking part in the story, it's your story. You know, it does. And after a while, you know, very few games. You know, say I love BioShock. I wouldn't play it again because I've played it, right? On the other hand, you know, I played Doom several times through because it's kind of, you know, it's kind of rhythm matching with guns, you know. So so I think it depends on the game. If I think in many ways, the more emotional a game is, the less likely you're going to play it again. So because it is emotionally draining, you know.
Yeah, I think it is. We are quite literally there. They're almost interactive movies now, aren't they?
Yeah, there you go. And there's like all the cutscenes, and you get involved in the characters, and so yeah. I have to say, you know, to be honest, these days, a lot of times I look at it and go, you know, I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many games I thought I'm going to come back to this. I never did. I stopped playing it. I just never got. I half finished it. You know, I never got back to it. Yeah, yeah. And if you compare that to, you know, like when GTA 3 came out, I literally, I would go, I'm just going to go upstairs and play a bit of GTA 3. Next thing, the sun was coming up. You know, and it was like time to go to work. I'm going, where does the time go? Do you know? You know, yeah, and you know that was this, and that wasn't a particularly good looking game, but it was really immersive. And then, you know, after a while, you know, GTA 5 I played all the way through, but you know, then it gets, you know, just the big time intensive things. You literally, I think, I don't have the time to do this. You know, which I think sometimes the shorter games, smaller games, are because you can kind of dip in and out. You know.
I think that's why I tend. I mean, I've got a few arcade machines in my kitchen, and if I'm waiting for my fish fingers to cook in the oven, I'll fire up We'll get a couple of games of Defender, and it's great. They're wee bite-sized chunks of gaming, and that kind of suits me perfectly. Just, I'm conscious of time here, Richard. Am I right in thinking you worked on some Bullfrog titles like Populous and that kind of stuff?
I did. I joined EA after they kind of headhunted me out of Mindscape, and I was very lucky. I managed to bring my team with me, which is because this is how Dark Omen ended up being published by EA, because it was actually started at Mindscape, but I did a deal with Mindscape to buy the game off them and move my team over to EA, and so I basically did. I initially looked after external development at EA, but then EA had bought Bullfrog a few years before, and Bullfrog had promised EA they would do 10 games a year. And I think there was a little bit of Pinocchio in that. So, so basically, at that point, Bullfrog was in trouble because EA was expecting at least one game a year, and they were working on lots of stuff that wasn't happening. So I spoke to Les, who was Les Edgar, who was Peter's business partner, who was still Peter had left by the time I joined. And I said to Les, you should really, you know, you need a hit, basically. And he said, I said, you need to do something. So I basically volunteered to take over Populous 3. So I basically had to leave EA and join Bullfrog because they were treated as separate companies, had to join a different payroll. And then I was in Bullfrog, and then I took over Populous 3, and we kind of the job was getting it out the door. So we basically got that shipped, and that was a fairly decent success. On the back of them, I said we need another hit, and I said, and he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'd like to do a sequel to Theme Park. And he said, well, good luck finding anyone to work on it. So I said, well, I've got my old team to work on it. They'll work on it. So I had my old Mindscape team, and they did Theme Park World, and that was a major hit.
Right, yeah.
So that's how those came about. And yeah, so you know, so I ended up basically doing those games with Bullfrog, and and then sort of Bullfrog kind of people left. You know, lots of little startups in Guildford. And also at that point, EA started doing really well with their sports games. Like FIFA started going through the roof, and everything was being compared to FIFA. And you know, the reality is, you know, Bullfrog games didn't really, you know, when you look at the numbers FIFA was doing, or Madden, or you know, basketball, it's like it was so hard to compete with that. Or SimCity, or The Sims.
Yeah.
You know, there was like telephone book numbers. So I think Bullfrog kind of faded out of existence, really.
Because of course, I think Peter Molyneux started. He left Bullfrog and started up. Was it Lionheart? I think it was.
Yeah, they started Lionheart. Yeah. So he. I said he'd started that before I left. Ironically, I ended up being the executive producer on Black and White. So our path did cross again because we published Black and White, and I ended up being the exec producer on that. So.
I mean, I don't think anyone can ever fault Peter Molyneux for his passion and his. He just had these ideas, and I mean, like, I'll be honest, I didn't even know Populous 3 was a thing. I didn't realise that was that in the PC, was it?
It's a PC game, and it's called Populous: The Beginning.
All right, I'll need to look for that. I loved the first one, liked the second one as well. I say, and I think it's things.
We went 3Ds, all set on a sphere, and you kind of zoom in and.
Right, okay.
I did. There are people still playing it, and we did a group last year with a bunch of ex-Populous team members and myself playing fans who are still playing the game today, and I got absolutely thrashed. Yeah, they basically reverse engineered all the servers, and they were playing it. So.
Wow. So you were talking about Pinocchio. Peter Molyneux. I think he's been accused of.
I did not call Peter Molyneux Pinocchio.
You didn't say that, actually, no. But I think he's kind of overpromised. Even I remember Black and White. I mean, one of the most dull magazines ever was Edge magazine.
Oh,
it was up its own backside. I couldn't stand it. But they had a big feature in Black and White, and I thought this looks amazing. And it was getting touted about how the AI and all this kind of thing. And I was a bit disappointed with the game, to be fair.
Well, originally, there's obviously different people will tell you different stories, but the game it was very hard to finish, and one of the reasons I ended up being drafted in is that they were basically running out of money, and they needed to ship the game. So I helped them kind of triage basically what they can and can't do, and originally the game was going to be like 10 levels, and then they told us we're only going to do one level. I said, you can't just ship one level, you've got to do at least 3 levels. But we managed to get it done. I mean, we managed to basically ship it by the end of about March of that year when they're about to run out of money. But it was fairly brutal, and it was kind of interesting because at one point Pete actually wanted to take the creature out. And it was like, no, the creature is the game. The creature is because that's yourself. And you're either turning good or evil.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting. Kind of glad I worked in it, but on the other hand, it was fairly brutal. I mean, it was literally, having to go in and run the meetings on a Friday because the team had kind of stopped believing that the game would ever come out. And for me, it was kind of, no, this game will come out. We're going to ship it, right? And we did ship it. But it was tough. It's really tough. It's really tough working on a game that's not finishing because you're always in a sprint. You're always trying to finish it, and of course, it just the amount of work gets more and more. And there's also danger if you leave a game too long, the technology will look outdated when you get it out. So I think actually Black and White was on the cusp of that. And we just managed to get it out. And it's actually my interview. I did an interview for Rolling Stone for that, which was quite interesting. The guy said I would never have interviewed anyone in the games business except my daughter loves the idea of the creature. So yeah, we did an interview for Rolling Stone. But no, it was interesting. I like finishing stuff. I'm a real completer. If you look at my sort of skills, completer finisher is one of them. And I really like finishing things. I like starting things, but I don't like the middle bit. So I'm a starter and a finisher, but not a middle person. So, but that was fun, and obviously could have probably gone. I suppose Black and White 2 was a bit. I didn't work with that. I didn't have anything to do with that, but that was quite tough, really.
But I think Peter, is he not sort of left industry? I think he kind of.
Well, they did some stuff. There was still a group of them working in Guildford on. They did that Cube game, didn't they? And where you're chipping away at something, and eventually you get a prize or something.
Oh yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
I think I think it's really difficult. I think nowadays we're living in a world where everything you say has a permanent record.
Yeah.
So if you don't recall what you said, somebody will prove you wrong, and that's difficult if you kind of making things up, on the spot. If somebody says, "Will you be able to fly?" and you go, "Yes."
Yeah, you said.
Right? If you just said it down the pub with a couple of people, that's very different to broadcasting on the internet.
Aye.
And so I think it's a little bit I think there's a real sense of wanting to please people, and I think that sense is really genuine. But it also has consequences.
Yeah, I think, as I said, nobody can take anything away from Peter Molyneux. He did get you excited. I mean, Populous was an amazing game, and what was the other one?
Take Populous. Yeah. Glenn did the engine for Populous, which allowed you to raise and load the land. And then I think I wasn't. I heard this with second hand, but basically Peter said, "Oh, it'd be nice with some people in it." Right, and that's how Populous was made. So most of the things you see, like Syndicate, was Sean Cooper. Syndicate was, and every game has a story. It wasn't just one person came up with it. There's tends to be a team of people that did it, and sometimes, the people who like the publicity would go and say, "It's my game." But pretty much every game, I tell you from personal experience, every game I've ever worked on wasn't just me. There's always a huge team of people, or like a small team of people, and that's the same with I think the same with every Bullfrog game. It was always a team effort, and every Lionhead game was a team effort, and pretty much every game is a team effort. It's just the problem is that the press like one person.
Yeah,
because they like the person, they like their story. It's very hard to tell a story about a team. So the press will always try and focus in on one individual. It's the same with Maxis. Will Wright didn't do all of the Maxis games.
Yeah.
But the press likes a nice, simple story.
Aye. A bit like John Romero with Doom. People always give him the credit for Doom.
Yeah, I've met John, I've met Carmack, and I know because we published Quake. I did Quake for the PlayStation with them, and they told me it couldn't be done. So I took my best program over to Dallas, and I showed him he could be. I took him over to Dallas and showed him it could be done, and then let us do it. But all of this stuff was team effort. Everything was a team effort. Like Romero was designing levels, and Carmack was doing the tech. Team effort. It's just the press likes it.
They always want a bit like John Hare with Sensible Software. He's the kind of that you think he's Sensible Software, you think of John Hare with his mullet he's not his mullet with his long hair, etc. But I think people like to kind of pin things on individuals. So listen, just to kind of wrap things up, Richard. I know you're not. Do you do any game programming at all now? And do you ever see that changing?
Only for my students. I still write little snippets of games to demo how, for example, you do a reward system, or how you do how you do loot boxes, or how you do jumps and stuff. But typically, I only program little examples for my students. So nothing.
So we'll never see a Cauldron 3 then.
Not for me, you won't. No.
No. All right. Okay.
Sorry.
And last thing, any top tips for Cauldron or Evil Dead?
What, for playing them?
Yeah, apart from don't play a copy, kids, because it's damned impossible.
It's hard to say. I think any tips for playing them, I can't think of any. They're relatively small games. The thing with Barbarian, you learn the moves. There is a definite sequence of counterattacks. It is basically with Barbarian, is the counterattacks get better. So the way it manifests itself is that the other player will be not parrying properly, and they get better at parrying. So you can't just do the same thing every time. You can't just go button mash it, because they'll parry you button mash, right? And so you have to kind of learn when you start doing the third. There's always a 2 or 3 frame advanced warning of which move they're going to do. If you learn what that is, you can normally get the strike in, and that's the way we designed it. I think with with Cauldron, the best thing to do is find some emulator and basically poke it so that the lives don't go down.
Excellent. Listen, Richard, you've been an absolute pleasure. It's been fantastic talking to you. If you ever fancy coming onto my channel again for a wee catch up,
I'm just probably got other things to say, unless you want to hear about my EA days and Formula One and stuff like that.
Well, listen, Richard, what we'll maybe do is I'll maybe pencil you in for a catch up maybe in the new year or something if you're up for it.
I was gonna say, one thing that might be quite fun is get some of this app and get some of the people and let's do a group chat and maybe do a sort of round table 80s games with the people who were there. That could be quite a laugh.
That would be good. I did actually have a 12-hour. Do you remember Interceptor software?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a certain chap goes by the name of Ian Gray. He wrote a game called China Miner. And I've always said it's impossible. It's impossible to play. I would put my mortgage on it that if somebody's never played the game, they will not complete the first level on their first go. It's impossible. Anyway, it became a bit of a thing that I played it every Sunday. People wanted to see me play this game. And then somebody said to me for a laugh, why don't you do I'll give you £100 if you play China Miner for 12 hours. And I said, well, tell you what, why don't we do a live stream? So last year I did a live stream. I was just playing different games. Who did we have on? We had Jim Bagley. Do you know Jim?
No,
Jim Bagley's a big Spectrum programmer. We had, who did we have on? I had Gary Liddon. I had the lads, Sean Southern. You'll know Sean did Kickstart.
Yeah, no, it doesn't ring a bell. But
yeah,
Sean, I'm an old man, so don't.
They did. I don't know if you remember the Lotus Turbo games in the Amiga.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, well, Sean and Andrew Morris did that. Cool. I had loads. I even had the guy. I don't know if you ever watched Games Master. A guy who used to wear a bandana called Dave Perry. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, no, Dave. I used to. Dave Perry did Captain Planet for me at Mindscape.
Oh, right. Well, I had
in his kitchen in 1 hour, in like 6 hours, the whole game. We did it together.
So Dave was in it as well. We had loads of people. It was brilliant. It was a really good thing. And the bottom line was we managed to raise £1,000 for charity, which was fantastic. So listen, I am actually planning to get another one of these. People have been asking me, you need another 12-hour live stream. So I will give you a shout, Richard, and we'll get you on.
I might not be able to do the whole 12 hours because it's probably
no. That's fine. I know.
Cool.
Okay then, Richard.
Good to talk to you.
Cheers, buddy. Take care, man.
Take care. Bye.
See you. Bye.